Listen, there's two kinds of mindsets. There's fixed mindset and growth mindset. If you're a fixed mindset, you can never get better than what you are. Just deal with it. All right. But a growth mindset that says there's no limit on to who I can be and what I can do in this world. So you get to choose. Which one are you?
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Cliff Ravenscraft, who's a mindset coach. Listen in as he questions me. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today's quote comes from Muji. Step into the fire of self-discovery. This fire will not burn you. It will only burn what you are not. Have you ever heard the story of Michelangelo and sculpting? Two of his most famous quotes speak directly to it. Every block of stone has a statue inside it, and it is the task of the sculptor to discover it. I saw an angel in the marble, and I carved until I set him free. Self-discovery is us removing the baggage and the programming that's holding us back from our ultimate life. We don't need more. We need to let go and have less. And that's our focus for today. I've followed Cliff's work for some time, and I met him at Podcast Movement and some other events. His first podcast was called The Podcast Answer Man. And one of the offshoots of that was another podcast called Retirement Answer Man. And that's run by Roger Whitney, who we had as a guest on here. And we're all actually connected through Dan Miller, 48 Days to the Life and Work You Love, who's another past guest on here. And all of this was the inspiration for my other podcast, Profit Answer Man. And I met Cliff at Podcast Movement, and I just told him that story. And then we just started talking. And the next thing you know, we shifted to spirituality. And I was like, wow, this is a conversation and concepts that I want to share with all of you. And so that's how Cliff ended up on our show today. Cliff Ravenscraft is a business mentor, professional coach, and motivational speaker. His focus is to help you break free from any beliefs and/or behaviors that are holding you back from living the life of your dreams and doing the work you feel most called to do in this world. Let's meet Cliff. Welcome to Richer Soul, Cliff Ravenscraft. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, I cannot begin to tell you how excited I am to be here today, and I am looking forward to whatever is about ready to take place.
I am excited as well, and the last time we had a conversation, it went directions I never imagined, so we will see where it goes today. Let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Oh, growing up, I'd say my earliest memories were of growing up in a situation where we lived in public housing, meaning the projects, meaning a place where if you walk outside, there's a very high likelihood that you might die. Quite frankly, that was the situation that I lived in. My father, biological father, from my earliest memory until his dying day, was a drug addict and alcoholic. And I just have some very interesting memories in my youngest childhood living in that environment. Now, with that being said, don't get me wrong. I had some incredibly awesome relationship moments with my biological dad as well. And I tend to focus on those and I'm incredibly thankful for everything that's ever taken place in my life. But to give you a picture that most people don't assume would be my upbringing, or at least a part of my story, is that I grew up in a very poverty-stricken environment where there was lots of drugs, alcohol, and lots of weapons and a lot of dangerous things happening on a consistent daily basis. Like, for example, police officers did not drive to this neighborhood because if they did not have tires to drive back out. This is the kind of stuff, and the cars would be set on fire. That's the environment where I grew up in. So, I'd say that's a little bit. You might imagine that taught me a few things just by experience and logging all the seeing as how our brain is in theta wave state for the first 7 years of our lives. So therefore, I'm in a hypnotic state where I'm open and prone to any suggestion of everything in my environment. That had a lot of programming there. So now I will tell you that I had, then moved out of that situation, and I had a lot more very blessed and very privileged experiences in my life. Still early in my childhood, even before I turned 7. So right around the time I was from 5 to 7 years old, I was living in a much better situation, probably still on the low end of the income spectrum, what do they call it? Lower class, if you will. I was probably at the upper end of the lower class. And then from the time my mom got remarried to who became my stepdad, who is now my dad because he actually adopted me after my biological dad passed away. So my dad today, my stepdad, he worked as an insurance agent in a family-run insurance agency that was started by his grandfather in 1937. And so all of a sudden now I'm thrusted into the lower middle class, which then, of course, through my single-digit years all the way up to my early teens, I actually witnessed the journey of my parents going from lower middle class all the way up to upper middle class. And then right around my teenage years, like right around the 16, 17 years old of age, I saw my parents making the switch from upper middle class to lower upper class, and then even a little bit, up there. And so I don't know if that's exactly what you were asking, but that's my background.
That is what I was asking. So you got to see literally within about 18 years, going from pretty much the bottom all the way to the top.
All the way to the top. And I also was observant of a lot of the ups and downs in the journey. It wasn't just a straight up and to the right kind of progress either. I know that I described it in that way, but in those intervening years between certain age, it wasn't just like, oh, here we go, we're going straight up. It was kind of like,
it always is.
Yeah. But that's an overview. You're right, though. It is something that I have had the privilege of experiencing the deepest poverty-stricken areas of at least my, within 150 miles of my place of being. I've lived in the most dangerous poverty-stricken places here. And I have experienced some of the highest highs that one can experience as well.
What insights do you have from that are maybe not so obvious to people? Like, people would just assume people at the bottom are miserable and unhappy, and people at the top are thrilled and happy and everything is perfect.
Yeah, I the biggest insight that I would say is that what most people would assume would be incorrect. I have witnessed personally and all around me that financial situations and where you find yourself in any external circumstance has no bearing whatsoever on how happy you are, how much joy you experience, how much peace you have, how much love and connection you have to others. Because I got to tell you, in spite of the fact that my dad had his hang-ups and his addictions and stuff like that, I will tell you, as a child, I was very much loved. And it's only in looking back in hindsight that I actually recognize the very dangerous and is the word precarious situation that I lived in as a child. Back then, I had nothing to compare it to. So it just seemed like this is what the world is. I didn't have anything. And by the way, because I had nothing to compare it to, it just was what it was. And I can tell you, I had a very pleasant childhood. I had a couple of, I had two really challenging experiences in my early childhood. There was one time that my dad, and I don't know that my mom was around, but I went with my dad at least to one of his friend's house, and it was there was this stairway that you go up to this apartment and stuff like that. And, they're playing their 60s rock or whatever and jamming out and all this other stuff. And I remember I'm just a little toddler kid, maybe 4 years old. And I'm thinking, I'm going to wander down these steps and go outside and catch some fresh air. And I recall to this day, it was yesterday that my dad's friend pulled out a knife and says, "You walk one step further towards that door and I'll cut your neck." So, I mean, that was an experience that I had, but it didn't seem like that terrible of an experience all the time. Isn't this what happens when anybody goes to head outside when you're not supposed to? So I don't even know that was actually a really scary experience. It was just something that was so jarring that was a part of my life. But here's what I will tell you. My life was still pleasant. My dad loved me. My mom loved me. We had family that was also in this area and they loved me. It's only in hindsight that I see the circumstances for what they were. And I only see it because of the contrast of what I'm able to experience today but here's what I will tell you. In those early years, in that government housing, in this environment, I experienced people who laughed, who had joy, who were exuberant and just fun going, easy going, at peace. Some of it may be drug induced, but not everyone. Not everyone. But also what I will tell you is that I've been in areas where it's the most affluent situation, where people seemingly lack for nothing financially, materially, and blessings. And yet I've seen in those circumstances many people who are absolutely miserable, depressed, worried, anxious, fearful every moment of their lives. And by the way, but the same could be said of anywhere along the spectrum. And one of the greatest insights that I've achieved and came to over all of this journey of my life up to this point is that our financial situation, the place where we live in this world, or any other material external factor in our life has no bearing on peace, love, joy, and abundance. It's all of that stuff is within. And if you can't be happy in government housing, you won't be happy. Tens of millions of dollars won't make you happy, I guess is the insight that I've learned.
happiness is from within, like what you said, because I know for most of my life, I'll be happy when, or I'll be successful when, and it's always, and that when is always changing, and it's always getting pushed down the road and so forth. And the reality and what I've come to learn is either you're happy now and thrilled now, or when you become rich, you'll still be the miserable person you were when you were poor.
I've heard something where somebody says that a lot of people are afraid to become wealthy because they've heard that money just makes you greedy and all this other stuff. And one of the things that I've heard many times, and so far I haven't evaluated at the deepest level, but as I'm saying, and I still agree with it, and that is money just amplifies who you already are. Money does nothing more than amplify your beliefs.
And I truly believe that. I remember there used to be a commercial on the radio years ago, and it was, sports doesn't build character, it reveals it.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with money, right? Money doesn't do all those things. It just magnifies and reveals it. And you can have no money and be horrible to the waitress, and you can have $1 billion and still be horrible to the waitress. It's who you are. And so you need to go figure out who you are and why you're in that state. And then it's up to you to change it. And as you've said, the external circumstances have no bearing.
Yeah.
I think that's a struggle for most people, because then they have nobody to blame but themselves.
Well, one of the struggles, I think, is the fact that you said that we don't know who we are or why we're here. It's the two most important questions I think we could ever answer in our lives. Who am I and why am I here? And as far as I know, Rocky, in my experience of this life, I was never confronted with that question until approximately 3 to 5 years ago. And I'm almost 50 years old. No, instead, I from my earliest recollection all the way up until my adult years, it's like I'm being educated by the school system, by my parents, by religious leaders, by the culture. This is who you are. And this is what your responsibilities are, or this is what your purpose is, to live in alignment with these norms. This is who you are. This is why you are here. And wow, when you start asking the question, or the questions, who am I and why am I here? It could just cause, and it does for some people, cause what's called a existential crisis. It's like, well, oh my gosh, do I even exist? If I am not this persona that I've developed over the last 40 some odd years of my life, well, then who the heck am I? And another way of defining it is an identity crisis, because who I have identified as is what I've been told is who I am. And what if for me, I'm like, man, what if I get to age 45 or so and I realize that who I thought I was for the first 45 years of my life is really not even close to who I am and why I'm here?
That begs the question, who are you and why are you even here?
Wow. So I have the answer to that question inside of me that words cannot adequately describe. But the best that I'll be able to give you off the top of my head is this. I am an eternal being, soul, spirit, are other words that I might use, that has no beginning and has no end, and that I came into this world to create and to co-create with other beings like me. And that at my core, I am in union with the creator of all things that have ever been created. God is one word that I most associate with, but it's not the only word that I think could be used to describe the source of all that is. But I am in perfect union with him, untouched by what happens in this world, but I have come into this world to experience this world, the cutting, bleeding edge of creation. And I am here for the purpose of exploring all that there is to explore and to create, because I am created in the image of a creator. And so therefore I came, and my purpose is to create. That's the best that I could do in that very moment.
And it is a hard question to answer. And it's a hard question to put into words, because I don't think we're given a language around that, right? We're told you're a podcaster, or you're a doctor, or you're a student, and this is your name, and that is who you are, and you went to school here, so that is who you are, instead of looking kind of beyond that. What happened, I think you said about 5 years ago, that started to change everything for you?
I started asking questions. I started to really doubt the validity of a lot of things that I've believed throughout my life. In fact, I would say it might have started when I actually learned a definition, a potential definition that you could use to define what is a belief. I would tell you that anything that I believed prior to learning this definition, I just believed that what I believe is true, because I would never believe a lie. So a belief is truth. And if I believe it, you can't convince me that it's not true, because it's a belief. And if it's a belief, it's true. Right? But by the way, this could get really esoteric and tell you that, well, actually, that is kind of true. But we won't go there. But the definition that I heard was, do you know what a belief is? And it was a hypothetical question, because I was listening to audio recording and he wasn't waiting for me to respond. But Tony Robbins says, a belief is nothing more than a feeling of certainty about what something means. That's it. A belief is nothing more than a feeling of certainty about what something means. And then if that's the case, if a belief is nothing more than an emotional state about your level of certainty about something, is it possible that I've ever had a level of emotional connection to something that I felt certain about, but later realized was not true? And then it changed my life. And the answer to that question is yes. And so therefore, that means that my beliefs don't equal truth. They're just my perspective. And my perspective or my perception may be inaccurate. And therefore, everything that I believe is up for question. And I began asking lots of questions about what I believe.
I think that's one of the problems we struggle with in the world today. Everyone has a perception, and they believe it to be true, and they won't listen to anything else that's not within that perception. I think that's why we have the political problems we have today, or they are kind of proliferating out from there. I will say Tony has the ability to jar people, to kind of shake them up a little bit and have them challenge essentially their beliefs. That's what he does. And he has that gift. And he's one of the few people I've seen. I don't even know if I've ever met anyone who can do it the way he does it. So what were some of those early questions? What should people be asking themselves?
Okay. So I don't know if I would be willing to say what other people should be doing, including what questions they should be asking. But I can tell you what questions I was asking myself. So one of the questions I was asking myself is, how do I feel about the fact that as a Christian, I've been taught that the Bible is the only source of truth, and that it is the inerrant, perfect word of God, and that Jesus is God, and he's the only one who has ever attained perfect unity and all this other stuff. And I've been taught that I, as a mere mortal, flesh and blood human being, was born with a condition of eternal damnation unless I somehow come across the knowledge of Jesus Christ, of what he did, where, thanks be to the Holy Father in heaven, he took out all of his wrath and anger and punishment and put it all on his son, Jesus. Praise be to that God, that I am now saved. And when I put it that way, I'm like, holy crap, I used to really believe that. And when I believed that, I used to defend it so much that if anybody believed anything differently, they're of the evil one. And it's like, where did all this come from? And so those are some of the questions I began to ask myself. Are those things true? Am I evil from the time I was born because I inherited the nature of sinfulness? Now, I can say that I have a whole lot of, so other questions I began to ask, what does actually sin mean? And of course, what hasn't come out in this conversation, Rocky, is I used to be a Christian pastor for over a decade. And I was an associate pastor in the Nazarene church. And I've been involved in the Christian church since my very young ages. And it's always been a desire of mine to know God and also not to burn in hell for eternity. Those have been two of my number one desires since I was a little kid, and heard that there was a God. And if I didn't actually live up to his standards, I would burn in hell for eternity. And so I became an incredibly motivated individual on that front. But what I recognized, Rocky, is that did not seem to produce the life that I saw exhibited by Jesus. And so I began to ask questions about that. So, I mean, the number of questions that I've asked are, there's not enough hours in the week for me to share with you in a single interview for me. But I could go on and on and on about things that I've tossed up. And gosh, the biggest things for me, Rocky, were dealing with the fact that, oh my gosh, I can't even believe that I'm asking myself these questions, because the mere thought that I'm having these questions, what would happen if any of my Christian friends found out I was asking these questions, let alone maybe even having already changed my beliefs? And so, yeah, and then where does that come from? And where does my desire to fit into their expectations and their molds and their descriptions of who God is? And where is all of this stuff? But yeah, those are some. Does that answer your question about some of the, not necessarily the questions I think others should ask, because I think everybody should be asking their own questions, whatever they want to ask. But those are the questions I was asking myself.
And I think it makes sense. Everyone has their core beliefs, right? We could have grown up as twins and gone through the same exact experiences, and yet I would not have the same views that you do, because I would have my perception and my beliefs, and I would have put my thoughts on a particular event or on something that I read. And so I think it just comes back to challenging your core beliefs and saying, are they really true? Do they serve you? Maybe how do you know? And to constantly examine that, because the other thing I've noticed is that every 10 years in life, when we look at something, we have a different perspective on it. And so that was, I think, one of my biggest ahas is constantly looking at things from a different angle and realizing even I am hypocritical in saying one thing today and another thing tomorrow. And that's what we humans are. And then it's just doing the deep work to constantly question that. And then it's evolving, right? And constantly growing.
So you say the word hypocritical and you use the word we. So one of my values is I want to be an authentic and transparent person. And I want to be a truth teller. And so hypocrisy is a word that I attempt to avoid at all costs. And so one of the ways that I think it's possible for we as humans to avoid getting into a position where we're basically hypocrites is, rather than telling everyone this is what is true, say, hey, with what I've been able to experience so far, my evaluations today are these things. Today, this is my perception. This is where I perceive things. This is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm feeling. This is currently what I believe. However, I am not claiming that what I believe and what I perceive is actually true. And so I think that if I were to communicate in that way to myself and to anyone around me, 10 years from now, what I'm saying today and over the next 10 years would not be hypocritical at all.
And I think that's very true. And I am not precise with my language, and I know that. And I also know that even though I think I know, I don't know. And I constantly challenge what I do know because I'm an INTJ. INTJs are known for constant questioning and constant wanting to refine them. They want to refine the model till they get it perfect, which will never happen. And so I'm constantly questioning, is my model correct? Is my thoughts correct? Is there a better way? Do I have it right? And so I very much concur with what you have to say.
So I am a huge proponent on language. I love evaluating language. So are you even consciously aware that you just threw out an I am statement?
Probably not.
So I am an INTJ.
Maybe I'm not.
Maybe you're not. Maybe that I am me, and I currently exhibit the results of some programming code that cause what typically is associated to someone with an INTJ personality. However, that's not who I am, because if I chose to, I could stop questioning myself. I could start accepting fully who I am. I could stop a lot of the other traits associated with Enneagram 4 or Enneagram 8 or INTFJ or the DISC profiles or any other person. This is something that came up for me earlier when and in this conversation, and I wondered if it would come back to it, and so it has. Personality, persona. This is something that I've recently discovered in the last few years, and I picked it up from Sadhguru. He talks about, do you know what a personality is? We talk about, I'm this personality trait. I'm this personality. I'm this personality. And the root word of personality is persona, which quite literally means mask. And so if you imagine the old time when they had the Greek plays, they would have an actor come out on stage and they would hold up a mask and say, I am Hanuman, and the actor would then pull down that mask. And in the other hand, he'd pull up another mask and he would be that character. And so what happens is all of a sudden, here's a mask, I'm an Enneagram 3. Oh, here's a mask, I'm an Enneagram 8. And all that happened is one day you actually got that mask stuck to your face. It's super glued onto your face, and now you have a personality. When in essence, it's not actually you. I am fill in the blank. I am that I am. I am me. And I am an ever-evolving, ever-changing, unlimited being. And so if I associate I am an Enneagram 3, I am an INTFJ, I am a DI on the DISC profile, what I just said is that I am now a limited being that is going to exhibit these. And this is just who I am. I accept it. I work around these weaknesses. I work within these strengths. And this is who I am. And I question that. What if you could change all of that? What if you recognized that all of the things that cause you to exhibit those traits come down to some programming code that you picked up in your unconscious/subconscious mind during the first 7 years of your life when your brain was in theta wave mode and you just adopted all sorts of beliefs. And what if you could root out some of those things? If you find that your INTFJ is not serving you well, you could change it. There's this book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. Incredible book. I have never finished that book. I read like 6 chapters and I finally got bored of her saying the same exact darn thing chapter after chapter after chapter. And I can just save everybody the trouble of ever reading this book. Listen, there's 2 kinds of mindsets. There's fixed mindset and growth mindset. If you're a fixed mindset, you can never get better than what you are. Just deal with it. All right. But a growth mindset that says there's no limit on to who I can be and what I can do in this world. So you get to choose. Which one are you? Anyway, so I say there, I love the only reason I pull all of that out, Rocky, is because I would encourage every time you recognize that you say the word I am and then anything after it, question that.
From now on, I'm going to try. I exhibit these characteristics at the moment. I have read Carol's book. I love it. Somewhere it's on my shelf. And, it's funny because I read a lot of psychology books, and every time I read them, it comes back to the same thing. And you even see it in her book. It comes back to, these are parenting books. You have to stop programming your kid with these things. And that's literally was my takeaway from most psychology books. And from that book, it's like, oh, crap, we're programming our kids. Be careful what you program. And then there's the aha. Here I'm programmed and I'm not even challenging it. I'm a few years behind you on the journey, so I'll get there. And that's okay. There is no comparison. That is not to compare. Comparison. There's no comparison. It's just a matter of learning and growing and finding your path that you enjoy on the way.
And that's the thing. There is no I'm further behind on the journey and Cliff is further ahead on the journey. No, here's what I will tell you. You are on your journey, where you are on your journey. I am where I am on my journey. And I am incredibly honored that the paths of our journeys have intersected for this period of time where we can walk together. And what a gift this is.
It has been. You've opened a lot of doors for me to go explore. And I've spent a lot of time since we met, probably barely a month ago, going through those doors. And it's been quite enlightening. It's been fun. The biggest one that I'm working on, and I've known I've always had to work on this one, is knowing to let go. Knowing like this is what I can control and this is what I can't, and give me the wisdom to actually discern the difference and then take action of learning to let go of the things that I can't control. Because that's what I think, for the early part of my life, I want to control this and I want to control that. Now it's like, I can't control any of that. So I'm just going to let life happen and then we'll see where we go. Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man Podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man Podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform.
One of the things that I've discovered in my journey is that there is one thing I can always control, and that is how I feel. I may not always be in control of my circumstances, but I always have control about a number of things. Number one, what I'm focused on. Number two, what meaning I associate to what I'm focused on. And it's actually those two things that will determine in any given moment of time about how I feel about what I'm focused on. So those things are all within my control. And so you could have two different people. One person could have an incredibly lucrative business where they're making, let's just say, $30,000 every single month consistently for 18 months straight. And then all of a sudden they go through a season where there are 3 months of only $11,000 a month of revenue coming in. And one person could see that as a lot of anxiety, fear, driven response to it. And all of a sudden, you know what I need to do is I need to just hunker down. I need to go back into a season of working for 7 days a week, 14, 18-hour days, and I'll get back up there. And eventually I will have come through this. Or another person could say, you know what? Why did this happen? Oh, that's why this happened. Well, that's interesting. It's inconvenient financially. But you know what? Now that I've learned from this situation, I think this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to implement this plan. Based upon the plan that I'm considering, I think I can still just work 3 days a week for the remainder of the year. I can still have my every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday off. And I will not only be back to 30K by the end of September, but I will probably be able to, as a result of what I've learned through this experience, see that actually 30K a month was quite an arbitrary limit that I was placing upon myself. There's no reason why I can't take this up to 50 to 60K a month, still only working 3 days a week. And I think that that's what I'm going to do. By the way, that is a real story of what happened to me. From all through 2020 and the first half of 2021, I was hitting 30K a month, which is, by the way, 10K per month more than I had ever made up until that point. The only thing is prior to that point, I was always working, 5, 6, sometimes 7 days a week. But ever since the beginning of 2020, well before coronavirus, but certainly all the way through coronavirus, working 3 days a week, making 30K a month. And then all of a sudden, the method I used to attain all of those clients had landed me 10K a month, every month, consistently above and beyond what I needed. And so I kind of just took the foot off the gas of bringing on new clients. And then 1 year after their 1 year commitment was made, just as quickly as I brought on 5 clients who were going to pay me $2,250 a month within a 90-day period of time. Well, guess what? Within a 90-day period of time, at the end of 12 months, those clients went on to other things. And I'm like, well, duh. That shouldn't be so surprising. But man, let me evaluate what I've been doing with my free time over the last, it's like, okay, here's what I could have done. And yeah. And so I can tell you Cliff Ravenscraft, with the persona that he had 3 years ago, would have been anxious, worried, and prompted to take immediate action and give up all margin, and would have worked around the clock. And he probably would have actually seen results from it. But the Cliff Ravenscraft with the persona of this current who I am, or who I am being in the world, I'm like, this is the big deal. I am not giving up my Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Mondays. And you know what? In the midst of $11,000 coming, I'm still going to take my 10-day personal retreat in the Smoky Mountains in July. I'm still going to go and take 10 days off and go down to Podcast Movement in August and hang out with my wife and celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary. This is, don't sweat the small stuff. And this is small stuff. By the way, everything is small stuff. It's like, that's all this is. It's just small stuff. I came into this world with nothing, and anything I have beyond nothing is all profit. So I'm always in the profit column.
And you can't take it. You're going to leave it all behind.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And the cool thing is I can pick it up again if I want to in another go around.
There is always that. And over time, we get better and better, and we learn.
Yeah.
And we improve. So there's a couple of words that keep popping up in a lot of the material I'm reading, even before we started having conversations. One of them is awakening.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
In the moment that you're asking me, the way that I would describe awakening is the difference between being awake and asleep is the first phrase, the first phrase that comes to my mind. The difference between being awake and being asleep. And then another way that I would say that is being in a hypnotic state or a conscious awareness of where I am in this present moment. So I'll give you a perfect example of this. Rocky, have you ever driven a car to a place that you go back and forth, same route, take the same road all the time? And then all of a sudden, one day, you mean to go to a different location, but you find that instead of passing the exit that you normally get off of, you just find yourself getting off the exit to go to work like you normally do. But you're like, oh my gosh, why did I do that? I meant to go here. And then you have to get back on it. Has this ever, anything like this ever happened to you?
It does. And most of the time when I'm going somewhere, I don't even know how I got there.
That's the other thing. Have you ever driven home and it's like, I have no conscious awareness. Not once do I recall ever turning on the turn signal of my car. Not once do I actually have any conscious recollection of me pressing the brake pedal or the gas pedal in my car. I do not recall a single car on the road. I do not recall seeing another human being behind the steering wheel of any car. I was in my own world thinking about the future. I'm literally either thinking about the past or thinking about the future. I was not in the present moment. So and here I am driving a car, thousands of pounds of metal and all these other materials, driving at a very high rate of speed, and I'm not even awake. Now, thankfully, God has given us this incredible subconscious and unconscious mind that it runs by habit and allows us to do that. Unfortunately, though, we spend, the average person, about 70 to 95% of our day in a hypnotic rhythm. We are asleep. We are not making any conscious decisions, and we are not in the moment, right here, right now, in this present moment, which is the actual only thing that exists, is language that I love to hear, and I understand at a deeper level now. But instead, most of the time, I found that I was in the past or I was imagining a future, but very seldom was I ever here. And when I became aware of this, it's like, listen, I want to live a more conscious life. What does that mean? I actually want to be awake more of my life. I want to experience more of my life. And so all of a sudden, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to drive home from the gym a different way. And if it maybe the way that I normally drive is the way I want to do it, but I'm going to count how many beautiful trees do I pass along the way. I am going to make a conscious effort to see if I can look and evaluate the hairstyle of at least 10 people on my way home as I'm driving past them. It's like, just stay in the moment and observe what is here, but and stop imagining a future that doesn't yet exist, and stop reliving the past and just live here right now. And that's one way that I can talk about awakening is being awake in the present moment and understand that the present now. Then there's a whole spiritual awakening, which is a whole separate topic, but I think it's closely correlated.
Do you want to dig into that for a moment?
So awakening from a spiritual perspective, in the context of I hear people talking about awakening, is not so much being, it is definitely being conscious, but an awakening is coming to the realization that you are not your body. meaning that this flesh and bones and all this other stuff, the accumulation that we call our body, my brain, my heart, my organs, my fingers, my toes, all of this stuff, that's me. But spiritually awakening in context, I see that as coming to the real, realization. Self-realization is another name for it. So realizing yourself, who am I? And recognizing yourself as not your flesh and body, your BMW. All right. So I just heard somebody talk about this. It's time to get out of your BMW. And I think it might have been Sadhguru again. So your body, mind, and this physical world. So realizing that the BMW the BMW is just a vehicle that our inner being is taking for a test drive. All right. So this is the physical world that we live in. And we have this body that we're currently in, and we have this mind. And so we're using this body, this mind to experience this world, the BMW. But who is we? Who am I? I am the eternal spirit that is not of this world. I'm in this world, not of it. And when you come to the realization of what it means to be in the world, but not of the world, that also could be called spiritual awakening.
And I had another word written down, and you've mentioned this word a few times as you've described this, which is awareness. And it's being in that moment. I'd love to have you kind of expound on that as well. As what does awareness mean?
Awareness is, there's two words that go tie together for me: awareness and observance, being the observer. So I would invite anybody listening to this to imagine a time when you have been angry. Did I ever do this for you when we were talking at Podcast Movement, Rocky? The imagining you're angry. So do me a favor, Rocky, can you think of a time in your life, probably many years ago, because you don't get angry these days, right? So can you ever think of a time in your life when you were absolutely angry? All right. Have you ever said to yourself, or maybe even out loud, I am angry right now? All right. Say those words out loud. Just say the words, I am angry.
I am angry.
All right. Now, I want you to say these words. I notice that I am experiencing angry thoughts.
I notice that I'm experiencing angry thoughts.
Does that feel different?
It is, because you're removing yourself from the emotion.
Now watch this. I am currently aware that I am noticing that I am experiencing angry thoughts. I am currently aware that I am noticing that I am experiencing angry thoughts. Matt, can you say those words? Or is it too much for you to remember off the top of your head?
It's probably too much. I am aware, right?
I am currently aware.
I am currently aware
that I am noticing.
That I am noticing.
That I am experiencing angry thoughts.
That I'm experiencing angry thoughts.
Now do you feel how far detached you are from the feeling of anger? And by the way, who is observing you being aware of you noticing, of you having angry thoughts?
And that's the one I struggle with, is that separation of the noticer.
It's a practice. It is something. I'm very thankful for the journey that I've been on and the path that I've been down, because I listened to a ton of stuff by a man named Alan Watts. And he was saying things that made, he's speaking English, and he actually has a British accent, so I love it. But he's saying all of these words, and I have no clue what he's saying. It's almost like he's speaking a different language. I'll never forget the day I came out of the gym and I was listening to one of his audio lectures, and he's talking about trees that are leaving again. And he's like, look at that tree. That tree is just leaving again. And he says, and of course, if you understand what it means for a tree to leave again, which, by the way, means that a tree during the spring produces leaves again, right? The tree produces leaves. The trees are there for a season. The leaves fall off. They die. They fertilize. But those leaves don't come back. But the tree leaves again, right? So so the earth is no different. The earth is peopling again. And so he starts talking. He's like just throwing out all of these metaphors and this language and all this stuff, and none of it makes sense. And finally, there was this one thing he kept saying over and over again. He goes, listen, the biggest challenge people have when it comes to awakening is the fact that they're trying too hard to awaken. Just stop fighting it. There's no need. Stop. So the reason why I felt led to share that with you, Rocky, is that's where I struggle. Well, just stop struggling. Give it up. Observe where you are. Just sit down and say, this is the best way that I describe this. Close your eyes with me for just a moment. Okay, you ready? You can do this anytime you want. And I invite by the way, if you're driving a car, do not close your eyes. All right, come back and listen to this when you get home. All right, eyes closed. Rocky, you're in the middle of a movie theater. It's an auditorium, probably about 500 to 700 seats, but it's a movie theater auditorium. Red velvet walls on the sides, big giant screen up in the front of the theater, and the lights are currently on. Are you in the theater?
Yes.
Okay. Now I want you to put yourself seated in the center of that theater. So you're going into the center from the front to the back, middle row. You are in the middle of that row, center seat, and now you're seated. And up in front of you, you see what?
I see the screen.
Okay. Now, I want you to imagine for just a moment. About a month and a half ago, you were auditioning for a movie role, and you got you got accepted. And so you had, on a movie set, experienced a chase scene. So you had to, on the screen of this movie set, you had to actually play full out. So you are literally running in this scene. And you are being chased by other people who are running. And there's a dog right behind you. And that dog is about ready to catch up with you. Now, this is a dog that, quite frankly, is trained and he's not going to bite you, but it looks like he's going to bite you. You know what I'm saying? You follow me?
Yes.
Now, where are you right now? You're on the movie set being chased by the dog, aren't you?
No, I'm sitting in the chair watching.
Ah, see? That's the thing. All of a sudden, you're looking at the screen, and now the screen is projected. Now, do you remember the last time you went to a movie theater and saw a movie?
It's been a while because of COVID, but we have a home theater, and so I do it at home.
Okay, well, I want you to actually stay with me in the movie theater for a moment. So
okay.
It hasn't been so far removed that you don't remember this. Have you ever been to a movie theater where you looked at the screen and the lights are out, and all of a sudden you lose all conscious awareness that you're in the middle of a movie theater, but instead you're fully engrossed in the movie on the screen?
Absolutely.
Have you ever seen a scene in the movie where the hero of the story has to dive underwater to free somebody that's caught on something down at the bottom of a car that just sunk in, and they're holding their breath? Have you ever found yourself holding your breath as if that was you in the movie scene?
Yeah, and your heart rate goes up and your emotions go wild.
This is our experience of life. So what happens is we lose the awareness that we are actually in a movie theater. We're not up on screen. We're not the actor. We're not underwater. Our life isn't in danger. There is no dog that's about ready to bite us, but we're freaking out about it. But we're in the comfort of a movie theater with nobody else around us, and we've never been more safe. We've never been more at comfort and peace. But here we are freaked out because we believe we're in the screen. Now, I want you to imagine this. Have you ever, during a movie or during the credits, look behind you and saw the projector projecting light, and you see a bunch of beams of light?
With dust particles.
With dust particles, exactly. And the interesting thing is, as you were looking at that screen, it was so clear. It was so vivid. It looked so lifelike. It even looked like that was real. But yet it was nothing more than an illusion. The whole movie you just watched was nothing more than an illusion. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to keep yourself seated in that chair. And I want you to walk out. I want you, the spirit of who you are, your soul, your inner being. I want you to step out of your body that's still sitting in the middle of the theater. You got me? Okay, you and I, spirit beings, are going to go for a walk. Now, you in the theater cannot see this happening. You are asleep watching the movie on the screen, and your heart rate is up because the dog's about ready to bite you. Or you're about ready to die because you can't get enough breath and you're going to drown. That's what's going on. But you and I, spirit beings, you and I are walking out of the theater down the exit. We're going to go at the end of the hallway in the movie building. We're going to walk up some steps. We're walking down a long corridor, and we see the door that says Projection Theater 9. Now we go inside, and the projector is projecting this horrific scene of action and danger and all this other stuff, right? And yet you and I, as spirit beings, all we're doing is we're going to look through the glass between the projection room and the movie theater. Now, look through the glass. Do you see yourself sitting in the movie theater? That's the observer. That's who you are.
It's hard to make the separation, but it's practice, right?
It's practice.
Like everything in life. It's hard until you learn to do it better. Some things are easy at the beginning. I'm watching my language.
How about if I will say this? I will agree that it will be hard and take lots of practice until you decide that it's no longer hard and takes lots of practice.
Very fair. Part of that is letting go, right?
Yeah. And the word letting go, what does that mean? And why is there hesitancy about the letting go? What are we afraid of losing if we let go?
I have no idea.
You asked Cliff, so what kind of questions should we ask ourselves? And Rocky, I would not suggest that this is a question you should ask yourself, but this is a question that I had to ask myself. What am I afraid of letting go of? If I let go, what am I afraid of losing? And all of a sudden it comes back to my one of my concerns initially was, gosh, if I lose this, does this mean that my devotion to Jesus has been a complete all for nothing? And it's like, wow, no, Jesus, I have a much greater appreciation for Jesus and his teachings than I ever have before. And all of a sudden it's like, man, when I began to ask myself the question, well, gosh, what am I afraid of losing? If I let go, what am I afraid of losing? Why am I resisting letting go? And Jesus says, listen, what does it profit you to gain the whole world, but lose or forfeit your soul? Now, that's not that Jesus, I don't believe, was saying you're going to forfeit your soul and you're going to lose it for eternal and you're going to be damned to hell as I had been taught. No, it's just like, what good is it for you to hold on to all of these things and forfeit the understanding, the awakened state of your union with me? Jesus said, hey, you do all of that. Guess what happens? You will suffer many things. You will be heavy burdened and overwhelmed. And he says, hey, all of you who are overwhelmed and heavy burdened, come to me and I will give you rest. In fact, he says, I will give you rest for your soul. He says, for my yoke is easy. And when he said that, it's the same word, zygos, I believe is the original Greek. And it happens to be the same word in Sanskrit that actually leads to the word yoga. Yoga and yoke actually have the same root in union. So Jesus isn't saying, come to me and put a wooden a wooden implement that they use between two oxen. Let's go find somebody who has two oxen. Let's ask him if we can get our yoke, and I'll put one around me and I'll put one around you, and we'll just go together. No, he's saying, hey, if you're heavy burdened, come to me and have union with me. Be one. And Jesus prayed, listen, Father, I pray that they would be one as you and I are one. It's all about being one. It's all about being aware of your sonship of God. Psalms 82, 6 and 7. He says, why do you want to kill me? What have I done? And they say, it's not because of the works you've done. It's because you blaspheme God, because you say you are the Son of God. He says, doesn't your scripture say that you are all sons of God? This isn't the Old Testament. He's like, what? So if it says all of you are sons of God and the words can't be thrown out, then why do you claim that I have blasphemed? Because I say I am a son of God.
It's quite interesting how we misinterpret so much of what is there. And part of that is because we're told a story and we don't question the story. In other words, we're told this is what this means in the Bible. And every time I read it, I see a question. I'm like, wait a minute. And just that constant questioning. Is that true? Is that real? And just as the way you explained it, is that really the case?
I think there's a question that you said that you would ask me at the end of this, and I can't remember what the question was, but I think I have the answer to the question.
I don't think oh, yes. So the question was, what's an action step people can take this week to move forward?
Yeah. So Jesus said this. He says, do not worry about anything. Be anxious about nothing. So first action step is make a commitment today. As of today, whatever today is for you, I, from this day forward, give up all worrying. I cease to be anxious about anything as of today. Now, he says, be anxious about nothing. Do not worry about anything. Not what you will eat, not what you drink, what your bank account will be, where you will live. None of that stuff. Worry about nothing. Instead, he said, and here's the action step, seek first the kingdom of God. And if you do that, seek first the kingdom of God, everything else will be added unto you. Everything you need, it'll be provided. There's a whole lot of things that ask and you will receive. Knock and the door will be open. I mean, it's just insane what promises are there. But the key, the action, seek first the kingdom of God. But here's the most powerful thing that I learned on my journey is in another place, he says, and the kingdom of God is within you. Those are very powerful words of Jesus. The kingdom of God is within you. Now, if all of a sudden he equates not seeking first the kingdom with anxiety, fear, worry, self-doubt, and all the other stuff, but instead, so many other scriptures say, hey, whatever is pure, whatever is holy, whatever is noble, whatever is true, think on these things, hold every thought captive, and be joyful always. And again, I say rejoice and be anxious about nothing. How can this be possible? He says, in union with me. And that is found inside of the kingdom of God. And I tell you the truth, the kingdom has come and the kingdom is within you, within you, within you. And what is that? It's alluding to, at least from my perception, with the best that I can understand today, so I can avoid ever being a hypocrite in the future. The best that I can explain is my understanding is that Jesus is saying, seek first the kingdom of God. Seek first your inner self in union with me and understanding that you are in this world and not of it. And that your peace, love, and joy is all found in your union with me. And everything that you're experiencing in this world is what is called in the Maya tradition, or in the Hindu tradition, Maya, illusion, the projection on a screen. But hey, by all means, you chose to come here and be a part of the movie, so have fun. Enjoy it. Let's create together, but seek the kingdom first. Stay awake.
And I just want to clarify this, and just to make sure. I know you're saying Jesus said this, but then you also brought in Hinduism. This isn't so much this religious doctrine of one thing. It's a universal truth, regardless of what your belief system is.
Absolutely. I just happen to believe that Jesus was tapped into the same thing that the Hindus and the Buddhists and so many other spiritual practices. And there's people who are not religious whatsoever, who are very spiritual people. Those are things that there are many names, many different routes, many paths, which, by the way, wow, the fact that I'm saying those words, I would have probably said, oh my gosh, you must stay away from Cliff Ravenscraft. He's gone on such a deep end, and he is a heretic, an apostate, and he's leading people into the pits of hell.
And I knew you were going to say that. I just want to clarify it for the audience, is that when you look at all these different religious beliefs, they all essentially tell the same, I'll use the word story, but story is not the right word, the same universal principles of what you're explaining.
I would say that the different religions of the world are all convinced that they're right and that the others are wrong.
And I'm not of that belief, but yes.
No, I'm not. By the way, there are many religions actually say, listen, or spiritual paths that say, listen, we don't claim anything there's one thing. So I know that Hindu does not claim that their way is the way. So what I will say, though, is it reminds me of the analogy of the elephant driver and his many sons. He had 5 blind sons, or however many. Are you familiar with the metaphor? And so one son was given the task of washing the elephant's legs. One was given the task of washing the elephant's body. One was given the task of washing the tail, one of the tusk, and then the others of the ears. And so later that evening, these 5, these blind children were all describing what is the elephant? What's the elephant like? And they were all describing, it's like a big, huge column in the tallest building. And somebody else says, no, it's like a rope that hangs from a thing. And another one's like, no, it's like this. So they're all describing, they all truly experience the elephant. And they're giving their best description of, but the elephant is so large and they only have a certain sense of perception. They have a limited ability to perceive that elephant. And so they're all convinced that they're right and that the others are wrong. And yet they're all right. And they all lead to one elephant. God is just one big elephant. Let's talk about the elephant in the room.
I think that was a perfect analogy for the situation. Is there anything else that we should touch upon today?
I think we've done enough damage today. I think that a lot of people are going to go and have their individualized identity and existential crises now. And I think this is fun.
And I've already been leading them down this path. We've had many people who have touched on these subjects. I don't think anyone has done it in such a way that you have. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to chat with you, because I knew you could bring a very different perspective to it and share your journey and your reflections and how it's worked out for you. And that's the thing. The more paths we can show people, they can find theirs within that. It's not that you have to follow this one or that one, or this is your
go carve your own.
Carve your own. Yes.
Take a machete, head into the woods, and pave your own path.
And you know what? When you actually do that and you spend a couple days in quiet and solitude, these things start to happen.
Yeah.
It's amazing how that all comes together.
One of my favorite things that is the result of this journey is it's broken free from my addiction to the approval of others about what I think and believe. And as a result of that, early in this journey, Rocky, I would call up my friends and say, I'm reading this, I'm reading this, I'm reading this. And kind of just testing the waters of how much are they going to push back on what I'm reading and studying, and it's like, am I going to get am I going to be cast aside? And I had a genuine concern, right? And I would only test it out with certain people. And now I very publicly talk about this stuff. And the cool thing is I'm at a place now in this journey where I'm totally fine with just being by myself without any need for a single human on this earth to approve of what I believe in. But at the same time, I am eager to do life with as many people who are willing to have a conversation, not about what is true, but about the questions that we're asking and what we're learning as a result of the journey. And this is so enjoyable. And I also have come to the realization that I have chosen not yet to dissolve my physical presence on this planet, to evolve all the way to a spiritual awakening where I have whatever nirvana sukapa or whatever that's called, the highest up form of enlightenment. I have plenty of good karma that I want to experience in this world. And so, yes, let's go. And I'm looking for co-creators to do life with.
And that's literally how that conversation started when we started chatting. And
yes,
here we are, another step of it.
Fun stuff.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Understanding that I'm an unlimited eternal being that has never been born and will never die.
And we touched on that during our conversation. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Nothing. So much of what I have experienced was intended to bring me to the place of where I would understand what I understand now. So I would change nothing.
It's not changing, but would you have wished you had learned it sooner? No.
I think God is perfect in how he designs everything, and I wouldn't presume to tell him differently.
And I usually say, you could have brought me this wisdom 30 years ago, and I still wouldn't have listened to you. I wasn't ready.
I like that.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Enjoy life and don't worry about anything.
It'll just happen, right?
Yeah, that's it. Enjoy life. I was at Podcast Movement with you in August of 2021 in Nashville, Tennessee. And I went in and I talked to this guy that was at one of those little merchant stores or whatever that was in that Delta environment that we were in. And I went in and he says, hey, I said, hey, can I ask you this question? He goes, you can ask me anything. I have the answer to everything. And I said, awesome. What's the meaning of life? And he says, you stumped me. And so then I asked him my real question. And so the next day I go into that same little shop and he says, oh, I'm still thinking about your question. And I said, awesome. I said, do you want to know the answer? And he goes, do you know? And I said, yeah. And he says, well, what's the purpose of life? I said, to live. But sadly, most people will never do it.
Because they weren't awake. They slept through it.
Yeah, they were on autopilot the whole time. And by the way, so be it. That's fine. And with where I am today, it's like, you know what? There'll be another quarter in the slot of the arcade machine called life, and you get a couple more go-arounds.
That is very much true.
From my perspective, that's what I currently perceive as truth.
In the moment. If people would like to learn more about you, check out your work, what is the best way for them to do that?
If anybody has ever struggled with throwing hundreds and hundreds of dollars into the trash can after ripping them up and tearing them up when clients have paid you, then I encourage you to head over to mindsetanswerman.com/free and discover how I finally came to the realization of why, when clients would pay me for $300 for my time, I would take those 3 $100 bills and I would literally rip them up and throw them in the trash can. and how I finally put an end to that practice and began to live an abundant life. If you're interested in learning more, that's the opening keynote address for my Free the Dream conference that I host with my wife. And you can get that for free at mindsetanswerman.com/free. Now, because I want you to only do one thing when you go to that page, which is to sign up to get free access to that page, you can't browse anywhere else on my site, I don't believe. So the next thing that you might want to check out is cliffravenscraft.com or mindsetanswerman.com. They'll take you to the same place. But anyway, I would encourage you to just click on the podcast tab, and you'll see that I have a couple of different podcasts that are available. Since you're listening to my voice in podcast form, my guess is that you might be interested in one or more of my podcasts that I produce, and I produce a few.
That's because you started as the podcast answer man.
Many years ago.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Rocky, I told you I was looking forward to this. This has been nothing but pure joy, and I'm excited to have had this opportunity. Thank you.
As am I. Your journey is yours, and learning to awaken and let go is powerful. You unlock the ability to just enjoy life. If that is what you want, I encourage you to start researching and find your own path. We'll give you some clues. You can also go back to episode 249, which was titled Stop Fixing Yourself with Don Joseph Goey. He's another one that kind of gives you a few more clues. So here are two big questions. Do you know who you are and why you are here? Are you clear on your money story? These are thought-provoking questions, and it's not unusual to have a hard time answering them. Sometimes it takes months or years to get to the bottom of it, and then you change your answer. This week's action step: give up all worrying and cease to be anxious of anything. And the next part of that was seek first the kingdom of God and know that the kingdom of God is within you. And this is where we started, right? We have everything we need to be happy. Do you remember the story Cliff told at the beginning about growing up and moving up the economic ladder? It doesn't matter how much money you have or where you started. It's about going within yourself. And that's a journey only you can take. Chip away and create that ultimate life by letting go. Enjoy. It's a really fun journey. If you enjoyed this episode, do you know somebody who'd appreciate it? Please share it with them. I would appreciate you doing that. Next week, we've got on Rob White. We're going to talk about the maestro's monologue. Discover your genius, defeat your intruder, design your destiny. Another step forward on our journey. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.